Guten Tag, Kinder. Welcome to The Composer Detective, where we investigate the lives and music of some of the world's great and influential orchestral composers. I am your host, George Frideric Handel. Today, let's investigate the term orchestra. What is an orchestra? An orchestra is simply a union of instruments which must include stringed instruments. If you have a union of instruments that does not include the strings, it is called a band. Also, let's distinguish between an orchestra and a symphony. A symphony can refer to an orchestra, but more accurately, it is a piece of music for a large body of instruments and usually consists of 4 sections or movements. You may hear an orchestra called a symphony orchestra. There are 4 main groups of instruments in the orchestra: the strings, woodwind, brass, and percussion. First, let's take a look at the strings. Strings, or stringed instruments, are a group of instruments voiced by tightly stretched strings that are strummed or scraped with a bow. The highest and smallest string instruments are the violins. Violins are played, held out in front of one, like this, and tucked under one's chin. They play in 2 groups, first and second violins. Violas are a bit larger than violins, like a big brother, so they are deeper in tone. They are also tucked under one's chin and held out on the arm for playing. Cellos are even larger than violas, like the mama of the violin. You hold them in front of you and sit when you play, and their tone is rich and warm and wonderful. And at the bottom of the string ladder, we find the big, grumbling, heavy double basses, which you might say is the dad of the string instruments. Double basses are taller than most people who play them, so one must stand or sit on a high stool to play. Another string instrument, which is a whole string ladder in itself and is a different shape than the others, is the harp. It is plucked with one's fingers. The next family of orchestra instruments are the woodwinds, or woodwinds, a group of wind-blown instruments with finger keys to adjust the size of the wind aperture, which produces different notes. The instruments are usually made of wood, except the flute. The highest of the woodwinds are the little piccolo and the flute with their airy bird-like sounds. They are played out to the side, like this. Next is the oboe, which has a piercing, sad, beautiful quality. A fine instrument indeed, but what can I say? I play the oboe. The clarinet has an almost athletic ease, since it can play almost anything, and it makes a beautifully smooth, mellow sound. And the bassoon is the largest member of the woodwind family, with the deepest voice. The third family of instruments in the orchestra are the brass instruments. This group of instruments produces loud, sustained sound by air forced through the mouthpiece and tubing, and the instruments are usually made of brass. The trumpet is the highest brass instrument with a piercing tone and can sound official and regal. The horn, or French horn, has a mellow sound and it can play very high and very low. The trombone has a low, heavy, stern voice, but it also has fun parts. You will recognize the trombone because of its long slide that moves forward and back, forward and back. The bass tuba is the lowest brass instrument of all. The fourth family of instruments in the orchestra are called percussion. These are instruments that are struck or shaken to vibrate a skin like drums or metal like cymbals, triangles, and gongs. Piano is also considered a percussion instrument because hammers hit the strings. There are an enormous number of percussion instruments. Here are the most familiar ones. First, the kettle drum or the timpani, which has tuned heads so they can be made different pitches. These are the bass drum and the cymbals. Here are the tambourine and the triangle. Next are the snare drum and the xylophone. Now, let's review. An orchestra is a union of instruments which must include stringed instruments. There are 4 main groups of instruments in the orchestra: the strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. Danke! Thank you for joining me on The Composer Detective today. Auf Wiedersehen!